Hello, guys. My name is Sharon Flores. I am a third grade teacher at PSJ. I am going to be talking about Chapter 3, which talks about English phonology. Phonology is the study of the sounds used by speakers of a particular language. So it pertains only to English because phonetics would be the study of sounds across languages. It is a very informational chapter. It has a lot of things. I tried condensing it, but I am going to give the points that I feel that are the most important. So let's continue. Human communication seems to happen effortlessly. Human communication is more complex than the common sense view. Listeners predict and confirm predictions after acoustic sounds. Listeners make inferences to fill in information not included in the message. Social context helps determine the meaning. Speakers use gestures to clarify their ideas. The redundant nature of language allows people to communicate even when they miss some of the available clues. Different tones of voice, situations, roles, and status of the speaker and listener all affect the meaning of the messages. So there is way more than just producing sound. There's other factors that affect the way that we communicate. A more complex model. Linguists have developed complex models to describe human communication. They attempt to account for the different factors involved in communication. Successful communication depends on speakers and listeners sharing knowledge of references. Speaker and listener sharing common feelings about people or places mentioned. Listeners have to decide if an utterance is literal or non-literal, direct or indirect. So again, those are more factors that affect how we interpret or how we give out messages. And I put that picture, oh, Amelia laughed, Mr. Rogers. When I said make the bed, I didn't mean that. So she didn't understand that it wasn't literal. Why use sound to communicate? Humans are social beings who seem driven to communicate. Deaf people develop the ability to communicate with gestures. Hearing people use sound. Why sounds? Hands are free for other tasks. Sound travels around corners. Works much better than gestures in the dark. The complexity of sound production. Speech production is sufficiently complex that most researchers agree that it is an acquired capacity. The messages that the brain sends out to tighten and relax the muscles that control speech are so complicated that they must be acquired. The features of speech are complex and automatic physical gestures which cannot be learned, but are among the biologically innate features that facilitate the acquisition of speech by the human species. Even though hearing individuals use sounds to communicate, the biologically innate features that facilitate communication among humans may not be tied to sounds. What humans seem to have is the ability to use language to comprehend and produce meanings. She proposes that humans are born with a sensibility to particular distributional, rhythmical, and temporal patterns unique to aspects of natural language structure. Humans are equipped to understand and produce messages, and this capacity develops in the process of natural communication. So, again, it just talks about this is like how us as humans we have that ability to communicate because it's more than just sound. There's other things in it, in it to us, inside us that allow us to understand and to create messages. Using linguistic concepts to evaluate methods of teaching people to communicate. Linguistics is the study of language. There are different types of linguists: historical linguistics, social linguistics, neurolinguistics. This book is especially interested in examining those aspects of linguistics that provide insights to how people learn to read and write. The current approach, supported by the U.S. Department of Education, relies heavily on directly teaching small parts of language, phonemes and morphemes. Nevertheless, many teachers read to and with children in the belief that children can acquire literacy without direct instruction in the parts of language, which would be the whole language approach. Early approaches to second language teaching were based on the idea that second languages are learned and focused on parts of language, grammar, vocabulary. Current methods are based on acquisition model of second language development and focus instruction on providing comprehensible messages. Areas of linguistics such as phonology, morphology, and syntax can inform educators as they evaluate methods of teaching reading and methods of teaching second languages. English phonology. Phonetics is the study of sounds across languages. So it's the sounds in all languages. Phonology is the study of the sounds used by speakers of a particular language. Phoneme is a sound that makes a difference in meaning in the language. Different languages use different sets of phonemes to communicate. English has about 42 phonemes, while Spanish has about 22. To determine whether a sound functions as a phoneme in a language, a linguist tries to find two words that differ by just one sound. Example, per and bet, they differ by one sound. In this case, P and B are two phonemes in English. So the P and the B can completely change pet and bet. So that's why they're phonemes. It's a piece that will change the meaning. This example is evidence that a sound functions as a phoneme in language. No alphabet has a one-to-one correspondence between sound and letters. Instead, the physiology of speech. The speech sounds of English and other languages are formed by changes in the vocal tract, the area between the vocal cords and the lips. Air passes through the vocal cords and produces voicings when brought together, or no voicing when they are held apart. So this basically, the model is talking about how when we speak, we talk, we produce like different sounds. You have to do different like the way that you push out the air, that you move your lips, your tongue. I don't know if you all have ever been to that training for dyslexics, which they make us use like the mirror to see how we produce those sounds. So this model has the bilabial, which is like you use both of your, like in Spanish, right? Los dos labios, dos, labio-dental, interdental, alveolar, palatal, velar, uvular, and glottal. And you're going to see I included a lot of the tables that are given on how you produce the vowel sounds, the consonant sounds. And they're complex to understand, but this is kind of like the key to understand what is a bilabial, what is a labiodental. You're going to see all those words in the tables. So knowing where sounds are produced can be helpful when understanding student spelling. And again, this is what they use for the dyslexic students. The Herman method uses this, the knowing how the sounds are produced, like the M, you're going to close your lips and all of that. English vowels. Short, long, and reduced vowels. Those are the three types. Short vowels are called lax vowels and are called tense vowels relative to the tension of the muscles. All vowels in English are voiced. So when you say a, e, o, u, like you feel the vibration because there's voice coming out. Different vowels are formed by changing the shape of the vocal tract as the vibrating air molecules pass from one vocal cord toward the lips. Vowels vary considerably across dialects, and the number of vowel phonemes vary as well. We have the short vowels. There are 6 short vowel sounds in English, usually represented with just one letter. The table represents where the short vowels are produced in areas of the mouth and when looking from the left side. Then we have the long vowels. The 7 long vowels of English are all made by starting with a vowel and adding a glide. The tongue moves from one part of the mouth to the other, also called diphthongs from Greek roots meaning 2 sounds. Long vowels are indicated with 2 letters. The first letter indicates the tongue position at the beginning of the sound. The second letter shows the direction of the glide. One letter may represent. Reduced vowel produced with a weaker airflow, so the syllables in which they appear do not receive stress. These vowels occur in words with 2 or more syllables. So you have the schwa and you have the high central vowel. One of the difficulties of English spelling is that many different vowel sounds are reduced to schwa and or bird eye, and these sounds can be spelled with almost any vowel or letter. English vowels. In total, there are 15 vowel phonemes, 6 short vowels, 7 long vowels, and 2 reduced vowels. System is further complicated by the effect of an R phoneme following a vowel. So those are the art controlled vowels. It is not surprising that children have trouble learning to spell English words with the so called art controlled vowels. Educators who understand the complexity of the English vowel system can better appreciate the difficulty children have as they attempt to represent the sounds they write. English learners often have difficulty learning the vowel sound of English. An understanding of the vowel phonemes of English can be helpful for any educator working with English learners or students learning to spell English words. So again, Spanish is a transparent orthography and English is opaque. So the sounds do help. The learning how do you make those sounds, how do you produce those sounds, it should help to teach the English language learners. And like I said, it's also used for dyslexia. English consonant phonemes. Consonant phonemes are produced by restricting or stopping the flow of air as it passes the vocal tracts. Consonants can best be described by telling where and how the air is constricted by noting whether the sound is voiced or voices. So now it's going to be constricted, like you're going to stop the flow of the air. Like when you say the vowels a, e, I, o, u, your mouth is open, and the consonants, now you're going to like stop that air. Consonants generally appear in matched pairs, one voiced and the other voiceless. You have different types of phonemes, stops, fricatives, and affricates. Stops, fricatives, and affricates generally come in voiceless and voiced pairs. So the stops are formed completely blocking the air for an instant and then releasing it. Like p, p are formed by stopping the air by closing the lips. That's why they're called bilabios. The first sounds that the babies produce. Only difference between p and p is the voicing. T and d. These sounds are made by placing the tip of the tongue behind the front teeth along the alveolar ridge. The k and g are formed by raising the blade of the tongue. Then the fricatives constrict the airflow through the vocal tract. There are 9 fricatives, and they come in pairs except for h. The affricates are formed by briefly stopping the air and then releasing it with some friction. They are a combination of a stop and a fricative. So there are 2 affricates in English. Now we have the nasals, liquids, and glides. Again, they're still types of phonemes, but they have more the quality of vowels because the air is not stopped or constricted as much as the 3 of these kinds of phonemes are voice. And 3 of these kinds of phonemes are voice, I'm sorry. So you have the the n, and then the ng, which is like the sound of n in ring. And I didn't find the symbol, but it's like an N with a tail of a G. So English nasals are voice. You feel a little vibration. Liquids, 2 phonemes called liquids, a descriptive term to denote the smooth sounds associated with l and r. Glides, also called semivowels because they are produced with very little constriction of air passage. So you have the y, the w, and then the sw in swing. So there's very little constriction. Different sounds and the English phonology system. In all American English has 24 consonants, phonemes, 6 stops, 9 fricatives, 2 affricates, 3 nasals, 2 liquids, and 2 glides. So those are the consonants. Relatively easy to learn. Only 7 are represented by special marks. The rest use letters from the alphabet. The 25 consonant phonemes together with the 15 vowels make 39 phonemes in the English system. Teachers of young children sometimes worry that their students don't yet have their sounds, but this concern usually reflects the inability of students to identify or produce certain sounds as part of a classroom exercise. Often, young children simply don't understand what they are being asked to do. On the other hand, observation of children in natural communicative situations generally reveals that they do have their sounds. Phonotactics, the knowledge of the distribution of sounds. So this one is basically like we just know how to use the language. Like we know the rules of the language, I guess because we're exposed to it. Like people lexical learn, but they don't speak the English the same as us because we're like in a place where we natively use it. So in phonotactics, we just know there's a lot of things about language. It's kind of weird how we internalize them. One time maybe represent tongue twisters. I thought this was very interesting because it says like it's so hard for you to say these sounds because in order to produce a certain sound, like we just saw, your tongue has to be at a certain position, your mouth, your voicing, and tongue twisters, they make you realize like, oh, producing sound is not as easy as I thought. So I thought that was very interesting. Conclusion: despite the complexity of phonology, speakers of a language can produce sounds that convey meaning to listeners, and listeners can interpret these sounds. Focus their attention on what they are saying, not how they are saying it. Linguists argue that speech production and comprehension are so complex that they must be acquired and not learned. So even though phonology is very like complex, the tongue movement, the air, all of that, we can do it, right? We don't focus on, oh, how do you do it? We just do it. The scholarly article that I chose, it was about they did a study on African Americans that didn't speak dialect, the mainstream that they call, because you know how they'll talk like maybe they'll, oh, I go first instead of saying I go first. But the conclusion ultimately, they were also testing the phonology. So the conclusion ultimately was that Chapter 3 talks about how phonology and linguistics can play a role in learning how to read. They also mention how speech production and comprehension are so complex that they must be acquired and not learned. Similarly, findings suggest that readers who are not attuned to the ways in which language can be used flexibly and manipulated explicitly will be less able to appreciate how language is represented in the orthographic system and will have a much harder time learning how to read. Thus, it's not surprising that phonological awareness mediated the relationship between dialect variation and word reading. Through this study, we were able to see the importance of teaching phonology, even though they were trying to figure out if their non-mainstream American English dialect affected their reading when talking. When taking into account phonological instruction, it was found that this attributed more. So they were kind of saying, they don't speak the mainstream English the way that it should, like we see in movies. And they were trying to see if that affected. But they also wanted, because there was two hypotheses. There was one hypothesis that but there was another hypothesis that, hey, they're developing the metalinguistic. They know how to use language because they compared it to how we code switch. When we code switch, we don't just put the word, like we know where the noun goes. Like we're say, pass me the jugo, pass me the juice, but we know that there's supposed to be a noun there, right? So, ultimately, they found out that these kids were struggling because they were all African American from low socioeconomic status, but they were struggling more because of phonology instruction. So this made sense, because this chapter emphasizes the importance of phonology. So I thought it was very interesting because it was kind of touching up on a, like a social linguistic view when it came to the non-mainstream English, but it ended up concluding that the instruction was needed because these kids, even though the kind of tasks that they would give them, like they were still able to produce and to understand mainstream English, but it was more towards their phonics, their phonological awareness, their manipulation of the language that they were struggling with. So um, that was my summary on the chapter. To be honest, it was hard because there's just all these terms. But like I said, I think this is a matter of practicing it. I went to a training from the Herman Method. I already said it, but that's why I think it was good when I read this chapter. I just had that background knowledge on the production of sounds, on looking at the mirror, on the position of the tongue, the closing the lips, stopping the air. So it really helped me. But I just think this is a chapter that had a lot of information that would help a lot, especially with those struggling readers. Maybe find out why are they struggling, and seeing also that the English language is very complex. Another thing, um it can, help the English language learners because it's just so different that maybe with these movements, understanding all of this, they'll understand, oh, that's how I pronounce. That's what it means. That's how you read it and things like that. So thank you very much for your attention. And I'm sorry it took so long. Hope you enjoy and hope that it helps you understand better what the chapter was about. Thank you. By different letters or letter sequences. This is why linguists have developed phonemic transcription, a more consistent method to analyze the sounds that an alphabet provides. So it's like the sound F. It can be produced with it can be represented by the letter F or by the letters PH. So linguists came with like a universal way to represent sounds. Example, the first sound of cat and kite is always reading with a K in between slash marks. So that represents K. Phonemes are indicated by putting them between slash marks, changes meaning. Phonetic transcription within square brackets doesn't change the meaning. The phonemes of a language don't sound the same each time they are produced, but all the variations perceived as instances of the same sound by the speakers of a language. That is why linguists claim that phonemes are perceptual, not physical.